My name is Mark, and 3 months after the most expensive wedding of my life, my wife looked at me across our kitchen table and said, "I hate you." No shouting. No tears. Just that sentence, delivered calmly, as if she were commenting on the weather. This story begins long before that moment, before the K-1 visa, before the dress, before the guests who flew in and toasted our future. It begins with optimism, paperwork, and a belief that love, if handled carefully, could be imported legally and safely. Julia was from Ukraine. Intelligent, composed, beautiful in a restrained way that felt mature rather than flashy. We met online, talked for months, visited twice, and decided to do things the right way. The fiancé visa. Lawyers. Forms. Interviews. Everyone congratulated me on being careful. My brother Preston did too, though he didn't see her smile the way others did. Preston has been blind since childhood. He said people reveal themselves in tone, not in faces. My mother Mary was quieter. She asked questions that felt unnecessary at the time. Why the rush? Why the pressure? Why Julia spoke more about America than about us? I ignored that. I focused on logistics. When the visa was approved, I felt proud. Responsible. As if I had beaten the system by following every rule. I didn't realize I had only entered a different one. Julia arrived with 2 suitcases, her daughter Alina, and a small dog named Kai that barked at everything except Julia herself. Alina was polite, observant, too observant for her age. She watched how I moved, how I spoke, how quickly I paid for things. She asked questions framed as jokes. "You always buy everything, Mark." Kai hated me. Growled when I approached Julia. Snapped at my ankles when he thought she wasn't looking. Julia laughed and said he was protective. The wedding was exactly what she wanted. Venue. Guests. Photographer flown in from Europe. She cried beautifully during the vows. People said we looked perfect. 3 months later, the house felt different. Julia slept in later. Spoke less. Corrected me in front of Alina. When I asked what was wrong, she said I was controlling. When I tried harder, she said I was weak. Alina stopped calling me by my name and started calling me him. Preston visited once. After dinner, he told me quietly, "She doesn't speak to you like a partner. She speaks like someone waiting." My mother Mary noticed the paperwork first. Bank statements. Transfers. Julia asked me to add her name, for convenience. I did. It felt harmless. That's how every mistake felt at first. The first real change came not from Julia, but from Alina. She began speaking as if she were older than she was, as if she were repeating lines she had heard many times before. She commented on the size of the house, asked how much it was worth, asked what would happen, if something happened, to me. When I laughed it off, she didn't laugh back. She smiled in a way that felt rehearsed. Julia dismissed it as curiosity. "She's just adjusting," she said. "You know how children are." But children don't ask about inheritance casually. They don't correct adults on ownership. They don't treat marriage like a temporary arrangement unless someone teaches them to. Kai became more aggressive. He growled when I entered rooms where Julia was. He urinated on my shoes. Julia blamed me. Said animals sense bad energy. Preston noticed the way Julia spoke to me when she thought no one was listening. Not angry. Evaluating. As if she were measuring how much resistance I would offer. One evening, while Julia was in the shower, Alina sat next to me and said quietly, "Mom says you are lucky." I asked her what she meant. She shrugged. "Lucky because you help us." That word. Help. It echoed too closely to other stories I had heard too late. I asked Julia directly if something was wrong. She sighed dramatically and said America wasn't what she imagined. That she felt trapped. That she had sacrificed everything for me. I apologized. I always apologized first. That became the pattern. 3 months after the wedding, Julia stopped pretending. That's the only way I can describe it. The warmth vanished. The politeness remained, but it was sharp now, transactional. She criticized how I dressed, how I spoke, how I handled money. She said American men were weak. That Ukrainian men would never tolerate certain things. When I asked why she married me if she felt that way, she said she had no choice. That word again. No choice. Mary noticed bruises on Julia's arm one morning. Julia blamed the door. Later that day, she hinted to Mary that I was emotionally difficult. Mary didn't accuse me. She asked me questions instead. Preston, blind but attentive, asked me if Julia ever touched my arm when she spoke. I realized she hadn't in weeks. The house became quiet, tense. Alina started recording arguments on her phone. When I noticed, she didn't hide it. She said calmly, just in case. One night, after an argument about money, Julia looked at me and said the sentence that ended everything. I hate you. Not screamed. Not whispered. Said as a conclusion. As if she had reached the end of a process. I asked her why. She said she hated my face. My voice. My country. She said she had waited long enough. That's when I understood. The visa had served its purpose. The wedding had done its job. And now the real negotiation was about to begin. After she said she hated me, the house didn't explode into chaos. It became organized. That was the frightening part. Julia started speaking in terms of consequences. Calm sentences. Legal words. She said she knew her rights. She reminded me that the K-1 visa required marriage, and that marriage had happened. She said the next step was her adjustment of status, and that anything stressful could look bad if authorities ever asked questions. Alina repeated things Julia said when she wasn't around. Mom says yelling is abuse. Mom says you can't control what she does. Kai followed Julia everywhere, snapping at me whenever I raised my voice even slightly. Once, when I stepped between Julia and the door during an argument, she smiled and told Alina to remember that moment. Preston heard the tone change immediately. She's documenting, he said quietly after dinner. Not with a camera. With behavior. Mary asked Julia directly if she loved me. Julia answered without hesitation. Love is not required to stay married, she said. Respect is. Then she looked at me and added, and I don't respect you. From that moment on, every conversation felt like testimony. I stopped speaking freely in my own home. I measured words. I lowered my voice. I started sleeping in the guest room. Julia asked for joint accounts. Normal for couples, she said. I agreed. Normal had become my enemy. Each concession felt small. Together, they were shaping something final. The first official threat came disguised as concern. Julia said she felt unsafe. Not because of violence, she clarified, but because of emotional pressure. She suggested counseling, but only if the counselor spoke Russian or Ukrainian. She said American therapists wouldn't understand her trauma. Alina began correcting my language during arguments, saying words like manipulation and gaslighting with confidence that didn't belong to a child. One night, Kai bit me when I tried to close the bedroom door. It broke skin. Julia blamed me for provoking him. The next morning, she photographed the mark and asked if I wanted to explain it or if she should. Mary overheard part of that conversation and confronted Julia. For the first time, Julia lost her composure. She told Mary to stay out of her marriage. Mary didn't raise her voice. She said one sentence. "I've seen women like you before." Julia stared at her with something close to amusement. Later that week, Julia asked me to sign another document. It was about financial responsibility during separation. I refused. That night, she slept in the same bed for the first time in weeks and told me she was trying to forgive me. The next morning, I woke up to a message from a lawyer. She had already prepared the paperwork. Forgiveness, I learned, was just another timing tool. The knock came early in the morning. 2 officers. Calm voices. Neutral faces. Julia stood behind them, wrapped in a robe, Kai in her arms, Alina beside her with red eyes that looked practiced. Julia said she felt threatened. She didn't say assaulted. She didn't say hit. She said afraid. That word did all the work. I was asked to step outside. Not arrested. Just removed temporarily. Preston arrived an hour later and helped me collect a bag. He didn't see the scene, but he heard it. The tone. The pauses. The confidence. He said she sounded like someone following a script she had rehearsed many times. Mary tried to argue. Julia told the officers Mary had been intimidating her too. That accusation ended the discussion. I was told not to return until things were resolved. My lawyer later explained that in cases like this, truth is secondary to consistency. Julia had consistency. I had shock. The house was no longer mine in practice, even if it still was on paper. That gap was all she needed. Once I was out, Julia stopped pretending entirely. Through her lawyer, she demanded financial support, exclusive access to accounts, and silence. She reminded me of the visa process. How cooperation looked good. How conflict raised questions. She said if I wanted things to stay simple, I should do exactly as advised. Alina sent me a message from Julia's phone by mistake. It said, "We almost done." Julia apologized later and said Alina had misunderstood English. Preston laughed bitterly when I told him. "Children don't invent timelines," he said. Mary blamed herself for not speaking louder sooner. I blamed myself for not listening. Kai appeared once more in my life through photographs sent to document aggressive behavior. The dog had become evidence. Julia filed for adjustment of status successfully. The marriage had done its job. I became irrelevant the moment the paperwork cleared. The divorce was fast. Efficient. Devastating. Julia moved out only after securing everything she needed. She left behind furniture she didn't want and memories she never valued. Alina never spoke to me again. Kai barked as they drove away. Preston stayed with me through the quiet weeks that followed. He said blindness teaches you something most people never learn. You hear intention before action. Mary stopped asking questions and started cooking meals again, as if feeding people was the only language left that made sense. I sold the house. Too many ghosts. I changed my number. I stopped explaining the story to people who wanted drama instead of understanding. What stayed with me was not rage, but humiliation. Not because I had loved, but because I had been reduced to a tool. I tell this story because it happens more often than people want to admit. Not because of visas. Not because of countries. But because some people treat relationships as processes, not bonds. Julia didn't break laws. She used timing. Alina didn't lie. She repeated. Kai didn't attack randomly. He defended his pack. Preston was blind, and he saw the truth first. Mary suspected, because experience recognizes patterns faster than hope. And me? I believed that marriage guaranteed intention. It doesn't. If you're listening to this and something feels familiar, don't wait for hatred to be spoken out loud. By then, the decision has already been made. Love that must be proven through sacrifice is not love. It's leverage. And once you understand that, you can step away before the door closes behind you.